Hi, PerspectiveWeather.com meteorologist Paul Doreen here on Friday, September 7th. Hurricane Florence was downgraded overnight. It weakened slightly into tropical storm status, but it still is lurking out there over the Atlantic Ocean as a serious threat for the U.S. East Coast. It could have an impact on the U.S. East Coast during the latter part of next week, Thursday, Friday, a time frame, for example. And meanwhile, we have to deal with the remains of Gordon over the next few days. That is an important player. I do not want to underestimate the importance of the remains of Gordon. It will likely contribute, along with a strong cool frontal boundary zone, to significant rainfall over the next few days, extending from the south central part of the U.S. into the mid-Atlantic region. Significant rainfall over the next few days will, of course, occur on already well-saturated ground, so that could lead to some short-term flooding problems, but it will only exacerbate the possibilities here for flooding down the road if, in fact, Florence does have a big impact here in the mid-Atlantic region, for example, and that is certainly on the table. So don't want to underestimate the importance of potential significant rain over the next 3 or 4 days here, and that is certainly looking like we will get some significant rainfall. First of all, the remains of Gordon pretty much stuck in place right now over the south central U.S. It will start to move over the next 12 to 24 hours or so, and then start to accelerate to the north and east, sliding up towards the eastern part of the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, a frontal boundary zone will stall out in this region right in here by the early part of the weekend. And even though the remains of Gordon will push well to the north and west of the I-95 corridor, it will have an impact because it will help to draw this front back to the north later Sunday into Monday as a warm front. Significant rainfall is possible with that warm frontal passage Sunday night, Monday time frame. And between now and then, we could have some occasional showers and thunderstorms, some of which can be heavy at times. So the combination of the remains of Gordon and this stalling out cool frontal boundary zone will again produce significant rainfall between now and Monday night, and that could really cause us some problems if in fact Florence then pounds us with some heavy rainfall at the end of next week. Meanwhile, Florence downgraded overnight to tropical storm status. It has slowed down also. Right now it's currently only moving westerly at about 7 miles per hour. There is plenty of warmer than normal water sitting in this region right here. So as Florence continues to move to the north and west, it will eventually move over very warm water for this time of the year, likely aiding in intensification, certainly back to hurricane status, and even likely back to major hurricane status before ever making landfall on the U.S. East Coast. And we'll talk about the potential track of Florence over the next few minutes. Meanwhile, a couple other systems here. These two systems very likely to intensify over the next few days, first into tropical storm status and then into hurricane status. This, I believe, would be Helene, and this would be Isaac. Helene looks like it would take a much more southern route than Florence, perhaps into the island area and the Caribbean area, maybe about 5 to 7 days from now. It'll be right in this position here, and that could eventually move towards the Gulf of Mexico. There is a chance that Isaac will be the last in the series here. These 4 tropical systems right there, this could be the last one to deal with before it turns quieter. And there's also a chance that this will end up turning to the north out over the open Atlantic and not ever have an impact on land. But certainly, Gordon, Florence, and what will become Helene will have to be monitored closely over the next several days. Well, here's the NOAA prediction for the next 5 days for total rainfall amounts. And again, I don't want to underemphasize the importance here of getting significant rainfall in the Mid-Atlantic region in the near term between now and Monday night, let's say, because if in fact Florence rides up the East Coast during the latter part of next week, we already have well-saturated grounds. Another few inches will not help the situation. Florence, of course, could produce some heavy rainfall amounts if, in fact, it rides up the East Coast during the latter part of next week. But all of this is through the early part of next week, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame, and generally as a result of the combination of a cool frontal boundary zone and the remains of Gordon. Again, sitting and spinning right now, Gordon will finally head to the north and east along the eastern Great Lakes over the upcoming weekend, and it will merge or interact with that cool frontal boundary zone to cause some heavy rainfall, not only in the mid-Atlantic region over the next few days, but all the way back to the south central U.S., and that is all before any impact, any potential impact by Florence during the latter part of next week. Well, let's focus in on Florence now, and this is the sea surface temperature anomaly chart, and just look at all this warmer than normal water here in the Atlantic Ocean. Florence right now is right about in this area right in here, moving slowly to the west. It'll start to resume a northwest track at some point and move over these warmer than normal waters, very likely aiding in intensification back to hurricane status, and eventually it could reach major hurricane status once it's out over those very warm waters in the western Atlantic later in the week and in the early part of next week. So again, this is a major player. Not only does a warmer than normal water temperatures here have an impact on the intensification prospects for Florence, also plays a role in a ridge that will form, a high pressure ridge that will form right in this region right here and become a major player in the movement of Florence. Generally, with warmer than normal waters, that helps pump up the ridge, and in fact that is what's going to happen. We're going to get a tremendous ridge building here during the early part of next week across southeastern Canada, the northwest Atlantic. That should allow Florence to move to the west towards the U.S. East Coast, and these anomalously warm sea surface temperatures are going to play a role in the intensification of Florence and the pumping up of that all-important ridge by the early part of next week. Well, let's walk through last night's GFS model run in terms of 500 millibar height anomalies. Again, this is where a lot of, excuse me, a lot of the activity is that will have an impact on the storm track here. We're watching that high pressure ridge that will form over the southeastern part of Canada, northwest Atlantic. First of all, a deep upper level trough sitting right in this region right here will move to the North Atlantic over the next few days. There was hope that it would help draw Florence to the north out into the open North Atlantic and away from land. It does not look like that will happen. It looks like Florence will be left behind by that trough. Here goes that trough now. We're into Saturday morning, and here it goes into the North Atlantic, and here is Florence depicted on this 500 millibar height anomaly forecast map. That trough does not, it appears, pick up Florence, and therefore it is allowed to move to the north and west. And look at this ridge that is forming here. This is just a monster ridge, and it's going to play a major role in the eventual movement towards the U.S. East Coast of Florence. Here we are now into Tuesday. Very strong ridging here. Winds flow clockwise around high pressure, and that again will help allow Florence to push towards the coast. Meanwhile, down here, this is likely to be Helene taking that southern track here. Let's move forward here. Now, watch what happens here with this incredibly strong blocking type high pressure ridge. We often talk about a blocking pattern in the wintertime. Same thing could happen this time of the year with a tremendous ridge to the north. It will force this storm to slow down, and that is the last thing we want to hear along the East Coast, as a hurricane to slow down, even perhaps stall out or take a loop back around. And let's just move forward here and watch what this particular model does. It slams these Outer Banks, the southeastern part of Virginia with Florence here, and then it just tends to slow down and even kind of loop back around here, and that is all due to this tremendous ridge that will form. That is just one scenario here for a storm track from last night's 6Z GFS model run. The key player here is this upper level ridge, and unfortunately, the reason I have a big concern about the U.S. East Coast is models tend to underdo these ridges. So if anything, this ridge could turn out a little bit stronger than what the models are indicating right now. And again, that will help allow Florence to move westward, northwestward, all the way back towards the U.S. East Coast. Now, we just looked at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast from last night's 6Z GFS model run. This is a compilation of Ensemble Runs storm track predictions for Florence. Both the operational, which is what we're just looking at right now, and again it goes towards the Outer Banks and then over the Delmarva Peninsula and then kind of takes a little loop around. Again, not an outrageous scenario for this thing to slow down or even stall out or loop around, given that tremendous high pressure blocking type of ridge to the north. And again, that is not good news here. The black here represents the mean of the ensemble runs. We talked about this yesterday. The ensemble runs, each run has a little bit different in terms of initial conditions, and when all of these runs have a similar longer term solution, that raises the confidence in that particular model forecast for the weather forecast. You can still see quite a spread here, and there still is a scenario, still is a hope that even being left behind by that North Atlantic trough this weekend, there still is a chance that Florence could turn away from the U.S. East Coast before ever making an impact. That is probably less than a 50-50 chance. However, there certainly are reasons to believe that it could come all the way into the Carolinas or the Mid-Atlantic region during the latter part of next week. Well, those previous storm track predictions were from weatherbell.com. This particular map shows the European model run changes over the past few runs. This particular map from weathermodels.com. And this is the very latest European model storm track, and the others are the prior runs. And basic point I want to make here is the European model has continuously shifted to the west and is now predicting the landfall down in the Carolinas. That is still several days away. We'll obviously fine-tune that over the next several days. A point here is that the model is tending to shift to the west, and I think it's getting a better and better handle on the strength of that high pressure ridge to the north. So this is the European model run. The prior set of storm track predictions were for the GFS model. Well, let's wrap up by looking at the 6Z GFS surface forecast maps going forward. These maps from tropicaltidbits.com. And again, there are some showers around the Mid-Atlantic region today. Starting tonight, there will be a threat of some heavy rainfall. Again, we have a combination of the remains of Gordon over the next few days with this stalling out frontal boundary zone that can produce some heavy rainfall. Let's just move forward here. And another key factor in the weather will be the drop in temperatures compared to recent days. This afternoon we'll perhaps see some 80-degree readings in the I-95 corridor, but this weekend will turn out much, much cooler than recent days, all thanks to this very strong high-pressure area moving into southeastern Canada this time of the year. And again, winds blow clockwise around high, so we'll form an east to northeast flow of air in the lower levels of the atmosphere over the next 6 to 12 hours or so, and that'll stick around through much of the weekend and keep us quite cool, perhaps even struggling to reach 70 degrees for highs in parts of the I-95 corridor this weekend. Let's keep moving forward here. There's that frontal system stalling out here, and here are the remains of Gordon by tomorrow afternoon, moving into the upper part of the Midwest. And again, any rain that occurs from tonight through the weekend can be heavy at times, and on the day on Monday. Here we go now by Sunday morning. Strong high pressure to the north. Gordon's remains sliding up to the west, but here's that frontal system. Gordon will move towards the northeast and help to push this frontal boundary zone to the north as a warm front. There can be some heavy rain as a result later Sunday into Monday, all associated with the front and the remains of Gordon. And here we are now by Monday morning. Still significant rainfall possibilities here into Monday morning in the Mid-Atlantic region. Gordon sliding to the north and west. And let's just keep moving forward here. Again, the worry is that any rainfall we get between now and Monday night could be followed by rainfall, perhaps significant rainfall from Florence late next week on already well-saturated grounds. And here we go now. This is a 6Z GFS, just one model run here, but it has Florence slamming into the Outer Banks and then up around the Chesapeake Bay and right over southeastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey here. Now we're talking about the end of next week, Friday night time frame. Again, this is one scenario. Then it takes that little loop around, which is not an outrageous solution here. It kind of stalls out. It's the last thing we want to hear about here. But with that high pressure ridge building to the north, certainly on the table, that any impact could be a long-lasting impact here along the U.S. East Coast. So certainly stay tuned to PerspectiveWeather.com for updates on Gordon and Florence over the next several days. That's it for now. For PerspectiveWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.